The White House has rejected reports that President Bush tried Monday during his meeting with President-elect Obama to link aid to the auto industry to Democratic support for a free trade pact with Colombia. White House Press Secretary Dana Perino said Tuesday that the president did not suggest a, quote, quid pro quo, even though he does support free trade with Colombia. John Podesta, the co-chair of Obama's transition team, also denied that President Bush had offered Colombia as part of a deal to bail out the auto industry. He told reporters Tuesday that, quote, the president didn't try to link Colombia to the question of an economic recovery package going forward. Democratic lawmakers, meanwhile, are preparing to push for emergency legislation to help the automakers during the lame duck session of Congress next week. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that she had asked Congressman Barney Frank to begin drafting legislation to use part of the $700 billion bailout to assist the auto industry. General Motors shares fell to their lowest point Tuesday since 1943.
We're joined now by two guests. Mark Brenner is with us. He's the director of Labor Notes, the largest circulation cross-union national publication in the country. He joins us here in our Firehouse studio. We're also joined via DN video stream from Colombia by Mario Murillo, professor of communications at Hofstra University and producer at Pacifica radio station WBAI here in New York. He's author of Colombia and the United States, War, Terrorism, and Destabilization, currently living in Colombia and blogging at mamaradio.blogspot.com. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Mark Brenner, first talk about the possible bailout of the auto industry. Who's for it? Who's against it? Who gains?
Well, look, Michigan's lost over 350,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 8 years, most of them in the last 3 years. Unemployment's already hit 10% in Flint. It's 9% statewide. There's no question that the impact of the free fall of the auto industry has really decimated and is going to continue to decimate the state and the region. So, you know, from my perspective, and I think from most of the perspective of the labor movement and hopefully the whole progressive community, there's no question that something needs to be done. The question is, what do we do? And I think here, we really need a game changer. We can't approach this piecemeal. We've learned both from the bailout of the airline industry post 9/11 and the recent bailout of the banking industry that what not to do. You know, handing money to the people that got us in this mess is really not the solution. So hopefully, you know, the labor movement is going to approach it this way and not look to Washington to solve their problems. You know, we really need to think about what it could be that would get us out of this mess, a comprehensive approach to transportation policy, really figuring out what role the factories in the Midwest that are currently producing you know, oil-based automobiles play in that? Is there a way to kind of move them out of that mode of production and put them into some other, you know, more fuel-efficient, more energy and environmentally friendly production scheme? And how does that fit into the spectrum of transportation? There's no question that all those should be on the table now. What scares me is that that's not the approach that we're taking. That's not what's being debated in Washington. And I think that this should be sending red flags to everyone in the labor movement and the progressive community nationwide.
It does seem, though, that whatever talk of a bailout does develop, there will be a question of the merging of some of these auto companies. So you're going to have fewer auto companies in the United States when the whole thing is over.
Right, I think that's probably true. And you know, look, these are the people that got us into this huge mess. And unfortunately, the union has followed them lockstep for over 40 years. Whenever it came to environmental standards, whenever it came to the kind of innovation that would actually have put them in a much better position to, you know, weather the current economic climate. So I think we do have to you know, not look to Detroit either and to the big three for the solutions here. What really is scary to me is the adjustments that we've seen historically and just in recent times. They look like IMF structural adjustment programs. Basically, all of the adjustment falls on the shoulders of working people and none on the people that actually got us into the mess. And that formula we got to change.
And is there a danger if one of these companies, General Motors or Chrysler, goes bankrupt, of the pension funds of the workers then being up for grabs?
Oh, absolutely. Last year, that was probably the biggest news out of the GM negotiations and the Chrysler negotiations first and then Ford later. This establishment of a voluntary employment benefit association, it's a VEBA is what it's known in the industry. It's essentially a pension fund that the union runs. It's a total transition from the way that it was historically, where the company guaranteed the pensions. And so now what you've got is you've got a partially funded retirement plan and retiree health care plan that the union is supposed to manage starting next year. However, you know, the money's not all there, and where's it going to come from? They're hemorrhaging cash, and it seems to me that that's the first place that the industry is going to point to the government to aid them. $25 billion is what they're asking for that alone.
Mark Brenner, people have for years been going to foreign cars because they're looking for smaller, more efficient environmental cars and, of course, more economical. Why hasn't the U.S. auto industry responded?
Well, I mean, why do people do things for profit? I mean, that's the real question here. They found a niche with minivans and then later with SUVs, and when gas prices were $1 a gallon, that formula seemed to work. Unfortunately, you know, as you sort of indicate, this was not a far-range vision. This was not something that actually would have helped position them for the 21st century. And so now we're stuck in a position where the taxpayers are going to have to actually play some role in that transition. I just hope that we do it in a visionary, comprehensive way, because piecemeal doesn't work.
There's also General Motors, as I understand it, they have a financing arm, GMAC, which is now trying to convert itself into a bank in order to be able to access the $700 billion bailout. From your perspective, is this a positive step or not?
Well, I think I look at it as a negative because it keeps us within the sort of framework that we're in right now, which is the way that the money's been giving away with no strings attached, with no accountability, with actually no say. Can you imagine becoming a shareholder in an organization without actually having a voice, without having a vote? That's exactly what the federal government did in the banking industry, and that's what they seem poised to do in the auto industry. It makes no sense whatsoever.
All right, let's talk about the allegations that are swirling about that President Bush said a kind of quid pro quo. He's against the bailout of the auto industry, but he's going to do it if the Democrats will support the Colombia so-called free trade deal.
Right, that's the rumor. That was, as you reported, denied by the White House. But I honestly just scratched my head when I heard this news, because it seemed to me like the one thing that Barack Obama mentions in the debate that seems remotely labor-related is what's happening to unionists and other labor activists in Colombia being murdered, and the concern around that, and whether we would sign a free trade agreement with the country. And then here we are, the one thing that he seems to want to tie the auto industry to. It felt like he was giving Obama the finger.
Mario Murillo, you're in Colombia. The reaction there to this question of Colombia coming up in the first meeting between President-elect Obama and President Bush?
Well, as you would imagine, anytime anything is mentioned in U.S. press about Colombia, it becomes front-page headlines and the biggest talk of the radio shows in the morning here in Colombia. So naturally, it's getting a lot of attention. I should point out one thing that's ironic, because if President Bush did indeed do this, make a link between the free trade agreement in Colombia and the bailout of the auto industry, in doing so, he would inevitably also be alienating another sector in the Colombian trade union movement and also in small industry, who oppose the free trade agreement between Colombia and the United States, particularly the small parts and auto parts industry here in Colombia, which happens to be the leader in the entire region in producing auto parts, replacement parts for both U.S., European, and Latin and Asian cars. So that would not be gaining much favor here in Colombia if they're trying to save the U.S. auto industry while at the same time flood the Colombian market with these products from the United States that would inevitably come with the USFTA. There is major concern. Obviously, the election of Barack Obama on Tuesday has been getting mixed reactions from the people, from the trade union movement, from the indigenous movement, the popular movement. They welcomed it, but obviously supporters of Uribe were kind of backpedaling a bit, because during the campaign, although they claim now that they weren't supportive of John McCain and Sarah Palin, there's no doubt that that's who they were crossing their fingers would have won last week. And because of the strong arguments and strong position that Barack Obama has taken vis-a-vis the human rights violations against trade unionists here in Colombia, there's considerable hope that there's going to be at least a renegotiation, if not a complete shelving of the U.S.-Colombia free trade deal. So that they're still waiting to see what happens, but certainly that it's being discussed in Washington right now is getting a lot of attention here in Colombia.